Hello, everyone. My name is Melinda Liu. I'm here to tell you a story. This is a story about war and peace. This is a story about strangers from different cultures speaking no common language who were allies helping each other survive. This is a story about the common humanity that bound them together, offering precious lessons for the future. In April 1942, China had been engaged in war against Japan for years, but America had entered the war officially only after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. In retaliation, 80 American aviators trained in secret for a daring mission to try to stop Japan's series of stunning victories, in fact, in the Pacific. These Americans were called the Doolittle Raiders, after their leader, Jimmy Doolittle, who was a legendary American aviator. Together, their mission was to attack Japan's home islands, something that had never happened for centuries. The Americans had an audacious plan, daring plan, to use heavy bomber aircraft built to take off from land, but then to train their pilots to launch from an aircraft carrier in the open sea. This airplane, called the B-25, had never been used this way before. 16 of them, B-25s, undertook this very risky mission, made riskier even at the last minute because they had to take off earlier than expected. The Raiders bombed their targets in Japan. This was a success. Everything went to plan. It was a morale-boosting action, which helped eventually turn the tide of the war in the Pacific. And as the pilots were running out of fuel in their aircraft over the Pacific, a miraculous tailwind actually blew them overland. Instead, they largely were over China. As a result, the Americans had to bail out using parachutes over China, landing in 4 provinces, mostly Zhejiang and Jiangxi province, in areas occupied by the Japanese. You can imagine, most of these aviators found themselves alone, hungry, lost, and being hunted by Japanese troops. They were discovered by Chinese strangers, grassroots farmers, fishermen, guerrillas, military, even bandits. Most of these residents had never even seen a foreigner before. They had no idea who these people were. One by one, however, the aviators were sheltered and fed and helped to escape from the Japanese. Of 80 raiders, 8 were captured by the Japanese troops, but 64, which is a surprisingly large number given what their circumstances were, made it safely to the areas of China that were occupied by the Chinese, thanks to the kindness of these Chinese strangers. By sheer serendipity, total coincidence, my late father, Tongxing Liu, was one of those strangers. And that's why I'm telling you his story today. He was a graduate of Tsinghua University, majoring in aeronautical engineering. He had been teaching in Kunming, where, as many of you know, Tsinghua had relocated to try to get away from the Japanese troops. It was reestablished at part of a university in Kunming called Xinan Lianda. My father, in April 1942, was waiting in a small town near Ningbo to be sneaked over the Japanese line to get to Western China. One evening, one of the locals came to his door, knocked on the door, and asked what should have seemed like a strange question. "Do you speak English?" And my father answered truthfully. He said, "Yes, I speak a little. Some of my university course material was in English." So they said, "Come with us and bring your suitcase." He didn't know what to expect. He was taken to a room, and inside were 5 white men in muddy uniforms, unshaven, hungry, and very suspicious, and of course, a little scared. They were the number 2 crew of the Doolittle Raiders. They had just bombed Tokyo, and they actually managed to crash land in a rice paddy not too far away. The problem was nobody could communicate with them. and they couldn't communicate with anybody. Everyone was nervous in the room because of this lack of communication. Immediately, my father determined that he would help as much as he could do. He became their translator, he became their guide, he traveled with them to get away from these dangerous areas. And from that point on, the Chinese, now being able to communicate, gave them incredible hospitality given the risks that were involved. Food, transport, protection, even had big gatherings in some towns away from the pursuing Japanese troops. My father traveled with crew number 2 to what is today called the city of Quzhou in Zhejiang province. Other raiders were also gathering there, and they prepared for onward travel to Chongqing. He told me often that he spent time hiding in a large air raid shelter there, sometimes for almost the whole day, to protect themselves from Japanese bombing. His encounter was not unique, I have to say. Astonishing examples of sacrifice and survival involving Chinese and Westerners took place during the war, even before Pearl Harbor. The legendary Flying Tigers, whose name I think is familiar to most of you, began their daring exploits in the skies above China. They were mostly Americans, led by Claire Chennault, who fought under the Chinese military. The Flying Tigers shot down an extraordinary number of enemy aircraft given their small numbers, and helped keep open the vital transport links through which supplies from British-held airports in India were brought to Western China, helping cities like Chongqing, Kunming, Chengdu, helping them stay alive. Last year, many audiences were moved to tears by watching a documentary titled The Sinking of the Lisbon Maru. In October 1942, Chinese fishermen in 46 small boats rescued 384 British prisoners of war aboard a sinking cargo ship which had been requisitioned by the Japanese to transport them. Recently, a memorial to these rescues was unveiled in Zhejiang province. So it was by sheer chance that some of the stories of these rescues that took place during World War II included my father's name. After his life-changing encounter with the Doolittle Raiders in 1942, my father and mother fulfilled their dream, which had been postponed by the war, to pursue further education in the U.S. So they were both in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And one day my father opened up the newspaper and saw a small news item saying, a group of men called the Doolittle Raiders are having a reunion in Minneapolis. So he said, hey, great, I'll go there and see my friends. And he reunited with his wartime friends, some of whom he had not seen since 1942. So the Raiders named him an honorary Doolittle member. He's the only ethnic Chinese to have this honor. And afterwards, he attended nearly every annual reunion that they had. So for these past 15 years, since my father passed away, I've helped dozens of descendants of Doolittle Raiders visit China to follow in their ancestors' footsteps. When the president of a group called the Children of the Doolittle Raiders, Jeff Thatcher, and I visited Quzhou in 2017, we suggested to local authorities that a Doolittle Raid Memorial Hall might be established in their city, and eventually they agreed. And to our surprise, very quickly, in 2018, we returned with 24 Raider descendants to inaugurate this memorial hall to the Doolittle Raid in Quzhou. I had hand-carried many artifacts from the United States to Quzhou so that this memorial hall could include original American as well as many valuable Chinese artifacts. That same year, 2 grandsons of a Doolittle Raider visited Quzhou to visit the site where their grandfather had landed by parachute and to raise a toast of brandy to their ancestor. So moving further into the future then, in 2023, during a visit to San Francisco, Chinese President Xi Jinping actually talked publicly about Raiders' descendants visiting Quzhou and the memorial hall to the Doolittle Raid there. He said after Pearl Harbor, the U.S. sent 16 B-25 bombers on an air raid to Japan in 1942. Running low on fuel after completing their mission, Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle and his fellow pilots parachuted in China. They were rescued by Chinese troops and local civilians, but some 250,000 civilian Chinese were killed by Japanese aggressors in retaliation in the areas where the raiders landed. So it wasn't a small thing that these people had helped the strangers who fell from the sky. Many of them risked their lives and many of them lost their lives. President Xi said the hope of the China-US relationship lies in the people. The foundation is in our societies. Its future depends on youth, and its vitality comes from exchanges at the subnational level. History reflects what Americans and Chinese hold in common: a shared humanity. Grassroots exchanges, especially among the younger generation, your generations, are crucial for keeping this lesson alive. I believe outreach to younger generations helps them carry the legacies of World War II into the future. Above all, the most important World War II lesson is that even under the shadow of death, the shared spirit of humanity manifest in acts of courage and mutual aid bound Americans and Chinese together. It's a powerful force that transcends borders and endures through history, a force that we need more than ever today. Thank you very much.